There was something unnerving about the way his footsteps echoed through the marble atrium. Sharp, even, calculated. It wasn't just the sound, though. It was the silence he carried with him. No greetings, no acknowledgments. Just a leather briefcase in one hand, a phone in the other, and the kind of expression that said he had already decided what needed fixing. Technically, he was our new CEO. Leonard Wells, 35, Wharton alum, big talker, bigger ego. He'd been appointed just 9 days ago, announced in a cheerful company-wide email that used words like visionary realignment and future-focused leadership. I'd read enough of those emails in my 17 years at Harrison Global Logistics to know what they actually meant. Heads were going to roll, probably mine. I watched him from behind the glass panel of my office, small but quiet, tucked between international compliance and risk management. Not high enough to be on the executive floor, but far enough from the sales chaos that I could think in peace. Leonard didn't knock. He didn't pause. He swept through the floor like he already owned the oxygen, poking into meetings he wasn't invited to, asking sharp, rapid-fire questions, making notes on a tablet no one else could see. His smile wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse. It was the smile of a man who had already made decisions but was pretending to ask for opinions. He didn't visit me that day, didn't ask who I was, didn't wonder why I had a red flag badge giving me full compliance clearance for our top-tier clients in Asia and South America. I was invisible to him, just another mid-level nameplate on a door he hadn't bothered to read. And that was fine by me. At lunch, a few of us gathered in the break room, those of us who'd been around long enough to stop chasing promotions and start watching patterns. Someone compared Leonard to a substitute teacher trying to fix the school in 1 week. We laughed, quietly, carefully. I sipped my tea in silence. I'd outlasted 3 CEOs, one burned out in scandal, one aged out. One tried to outsource our customs clearance to a software plugin and almost tanked a major trade agreement. I had no illusions about the title. Suits changed, faces changed, but the mistakes were always the same. They underestimated people like me. Later that afternoon, I passed Leonard in the hall. He glanced at my badge and then straight through me, like he was scanning a spreadsheet and I was just another cell with no formula. He didn't see the quarterly compliance reports I was carrying, the ones his Friday presentation would quote word for word. I kept walking, but something shifted that day, subtle, like a hairline crack behind a wall. The air changed. Conversations slowed when managers walked by. HR looked jumpy. The intern pool stopped joking near the elevators. I shut my door and sat down at my desk. There's a quiet that settles before the floor gives way. I've felt it before. I felt it now. And this time, I knew exactly where it would lead. The week slid by like a slow leak, silent, steady, impossible to stop. There were no mass emails, no dramatic memos, just meetings behind closed doors and empty chairs that hadn't been empty yesterday. People walked a little faster, laughed a little less. The ones who usually lingered by the coffee machine now stared into their cups like they held answers. I didn't need confirmation. I knew the signs. Restructuring wasn't coming. It was already here. I stayed in my lane, head down, reports in on time, emails sent in perfect Japanese to smooth a licensing hiccup with our Osaka client, then another in Spanish to calm the Venezuelan customs agency we'd been working with for years. I didn't complain. I didn't offer ideas. I didn't draw attention. That's how you survive these transitions. But the silence didn't protect everyone. Leonard's so-called efficiency alignment group started tapping people on the shoulder. Long-timers, department leads, even one woman who'd been at Harrison since it was just a 3-floor office near the Chicago River. They vanished mid-afternoon. No goodbyes, just cardboard boxes and brittle smiles. Their replacements arrived with shiny credentials and brighter shoes. Friends of Leonard, mostly. Clean LinkedIn pages, TED Talk energy. But they asked too many questions, the wrong ones. They laughed when someone brought up export permit codes and joked that our process felt like doing taxes with a typewriter. They called it modernization. I called it a slow-motion disaster. One guy, Eli, I think, asked in a compliance roundtable why we still used in-person documentation for certain customs ports. I explained that some international partners required physical seals for legality. He laughed and said, "We'll just train them out of that." Train them out of their laws? I said nothing, because I knew better. I knew what it looked like when arrogance wore a badge. The real alarm bell rang Thursday morning. Leonard called a division-wide meeting in the big glass conference room, the one reserved for quarterly reviews and contract signings. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. There were no chairs at the end of the table, no coffee service, just slides queued up on the screen and a stack of handouts no one had asked for. He stood at the head like a man presenting battle plans, cold, focused. "We need to be leaner," he said, clicking through charts no one had time to absorb. "We're wasting hours on outdated processes and redundant approvals. Strategic realignment is key." I didn't speak, I didn't blink, but I felt the room shift. The room. Then he said it. Every department will be evaluated for operational consolidation. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. I felt my stomach drop, not with fear, but with certainty. He had no idea what I actually did. When the meeting ended, people left quickly. No chatter, no eye contact. I gathered my things slowly, deliberately. You learn, over time, that the first out and the last to leave are always noticed. Just as I stood, Leonard approached. "Lena Brooks, right?" he asked, like trying to place a name from an old business card. "Yes," I said calmly. He smiled, the kind of smile that fits every occasion and means nothing. "What exactly do you handle again?" I could have said Director of Global Compliance. I could have listed a dozen regulatory boards I liaise with across 3 continents, but I didn't. I manage our legal and cultural compliance for Kagami Freight, Vasquez Maritime, and 2 other key partners. I also lead multilingual negotiations in customs-sensitive zones. His smile wavered. "We've partnered with a legal firm for translations, haven't we?" "I don't just translate," I said, my voice steady. "I maintain trust. Some of these relationships span more than a decade. It's about more than language." He nodded, distracted already, eyes scanning the room. "Well, appreciate the work you've done." And just like that, he turned and walked away. I stood there for a long moment under the buzz of cheap fluorescence, watching him disappear into the blur of new hires and old walls. He didn't understand. Worse, he didn't want to. Friday came cloaked in tension. The weather app said partly cloudy, but I knew better. The storm wasn't in the sky. It was in the office. The elevator rides were silent. Slack channels that once buzzed with gifs and inside jokes now pulsed with unread messages and clipped questions. Something was coming. I worked through the morning like I always did. Methodically, invisibly, with precision. Cleared customs paperwork for a shipment in Nagoya. Reviewed a sensitive trade contract amendment from a Chilean freight alliance. Sent a polite nudge to a firm in Valencia still behind on compliance documents. No one from leadership spoke to me. No one needed to. The air was thick with what they wouldn't say. At 10:12 a.m., an Outlook notification popped up on my screen. Meeting request. Leonard Wells. 10:30 a.m. Conference room 3B. No subject line, no context. I stared at it for a moment, then closed my laptop. In 17 years, I had never once been called to a last-minute closed-door meeting without explanation. I already knew. When I entered the conference room, Leonard was already seated, smug behind a folder embossed with the Harrison logo, pretending this was just another leadership check-in. Olivia from HR sat 2 chairs to his right. Her eyes flicked up when I entered. She didn't smile. "Elena, thanks for coming," Leonard said briskly. "Please, have a seat." I did. No small talk, no build-up. "We've been reviewing our operational structure," he began, "and after careful evaluation, we've determined that certain functions are no longer aligned with our strategic direction." I watched him say the words, recited like a script he didn't write. He didn't look at me, he looked through me, like a surgeon explaining to the patient why the limb had to go. Your role, while valuable, overlaps with the services we've now contracted from an external legal compliance firm in Toronto, he continued. As such, we're phasing out your position. No mention of Kagami Freight. No mention of the 7 regulatory violations I'd helped them avoid last year. No mention of the handwritten card Mr. Vasquez sent me after I pulled his company back from a customs disaster in Panama. Nothing. Just, you're done. Olivia pushed a beige envelope toward me on the table. This includes your severance package, 2 months' salary, and any accrued vacation. Leonard leaned back, his tone light, like he was doing me a favor. I know this isn't easy, but change never is, he said. We appreciate everything you've contributed. I didn't react. Not a blink, not a sigh. I just studied his face. Clean-shaven, smooth, confident. A man who believed every number in a spreadsheet could explain a relationship. Are you certain, I asked quietly, that the firm you've hired can handle our international partners? He chuckled, borderline patronizing. We'll be fine. They're very dynamic, cutting edge. This is the future, Elena. I stood, leaving the envelope untouched. I wish you the best of luck on Monday, I said simply. He blinked at that, thrown off by the specificity, but he recovered quickly, forcing that politician's smile. Thanks again, Elena. Best of luck to you too. I walked out without looking back, past Olivia's stiff expression, past the glances from people who knew what that room meant. By the time I reached my car, the rain had started, thin at first, then steady. I sat behind the wheel and stared through the drops sliding down the windshield like tears the sky was crying on my behalf. But I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Because unlike Leonard, I knew what was coming. And on Monday, so would he. The weekend after my dismissal was unnaturally quiet. No early alarms, no client calls pinging across time zones, just stillness and the sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window like a metronome ticking towards something inevitable. I didn't sleep in, I didn't spiral. I reorganized my home office. I answered a few cautious messages from former colleagues, just the brave ones. Most stayed silent, afraid even casual association with me would land them next in line. I didn't blame them. I'd seen fear like that before. It's what happens when someone like Leonard steps into power and starts swinging an axe, blindfolded. On Sunday night, I updated my resume. It wasn't an act of desperation. It was something cleaner, like sharpening a blade you hadn't needed in a while, but always kept nearby. 17 years in international compliance wasn't just a number. It was a legacy. Relationships, reputation, quiet trust carefully built one conversation at a time, in languages and cultures where silence spoke louder than words. I wasn't worried about the job. I was thinking about what I'd built, and how someone like Leonard could believe it could be replaced by a PDF from a firm in Toronto. Monday morning arrived under low gray skies. The city was stirring. Car horns echoed off damp streets. I dressed simply, navy blouse, dark slacks, and made my way downtown. Not to Harrison. To Crescent Stratagem Group, a boutique global consultancy housed in a restored brick building with polished wood floors and actual warmth in its lighting. A former contact, Tina Delgado, had reached out. We'd met years ago at a compliance summit in Singapore. She'd heard whispers about my exit before I even cleared out my inbox. We've got an opening, she said. We don't just need a translator. We need a partner. By 10 a.m., I was seated across from their executive director, calmly answering questions about trade risk analysis and the new tariffs sweeping across East Asia. The interview wasn't rushed. It wasn't cold. It was intelligent, intentional. By 2 p.m., an offer was in my inbox. Competitive salary, full autonomy, real respect. I accepted before the coffee on my desk had cooled. Meanwhile, back at Harrison, I could already feel the cracks forming, even from a distance. At 3:15 p.m., a message lit up on my phone from an old colleague still hanging on inside. Kagami Freight's delegation arrives Friday. Leonard's running the pitch himself. They think he's got it covered. I stared at the text. Then I smiled, just a little. Kagami Freight wasn't just a client. They were a cornerstone, a meticulous, traditional, fiercely loyal Japanese logistics group who valued honor over flash. They didn't like surprises. They didn't respond to buzzwords. And they definitely didn't tolerate disrespect. I had handled their account for 11 years. I knew every formal title, every tea ceremony protocol. I once rerouted an entire shipment because their liaison refused to work with someone who used a first name in the wrong setting. Leonard had no idea what was coming, and I didn't have to lift a single finger to make it happen. The damage had already been done. All I had to do now was watch it unfold. Friday came with an edge to it. The clouds above downtown Chicago hung low, like they were waiting for something to snap. The kind of day where the wind moved just a little too fast, and the light never quite settled. At Harrison Global Logistics, the tension was razor-thin. Conference Room 12A on the 15th floor had been reserved for the most important meeting of the quarter, maybe the year. Kagami Freight Corp had sent their delegation from Tokyo. 3 senior executives, including Mr. Takeda, their vice president of global strategy. It was the contract renewal discussion. A multi-year agreement worth $21 million. A partnership built over a decade, one I had spent every year cultivating. Leonard Wells, in his tailored blue suit and designer watch, stood at the head of the table with the confidence of a man who had only read the headlines. He greeted the Kagami delegation with a smile too wide, a handshake too firm. No bow, no pause, no respect, Mr. Takeda's expression remained unreadable. His eyes drifted over the room like a scanner, measuring, calculating. He didn't see me. And that was a problem. Leonard began with a polished deck full of buzzwords: efficiency metrics, automation models, lean-forward initiatives. He clicked through charts in English with no pauses for interpretation, assuming the language of money was universal. It wasn't. After about 5 minutes, Mr. Takeda raised one hand. Graceful, controlled. "We would like to speak with Ms. Elena Brooks," he said in a measured tone. The room went still. Leonard froze, blinked. "Ah, Ms. Brooks is no longer with our organization. We've transitioned our international compliance through an external partner." There was a pause. A quiet so deep, it pressed on the eardrums. Mr. Takeda turned to his colleagues. They exchanged no words, only a glance. Then he faced Leonard again. "Ms. Brooks understood our expectations. She earned our trust. She anticipated complications before they became disruptions." Leonard shifted, forcing a half smile. "I can assure you our new partners are fully equipped." Mr. Takeda held up a hand again, gently but firmly. "You have made a grave mistake," he said softly. "In our culture, relationships are not disposable. We do not build alliances with corporations. We build them with people." He rose. So did his team. "There will be no renewal of our agreement at this time," Mr. Takeda said, his voice final. "We value continuity. You have shown us none." They left the room in silence, the only sound their footsteps across the marble tile, a rhythm as sharp as the one I remembered from Leonard's first day. By 11 a.m., the news had spread across every floor. A cornerstone client, gone. By noon, the CFO had called an emergency meeting. By 2 p.m., investors were asking questions. Leonard tried to spin it, blamed cultural rigidity, hinted that the outsourced firm had miscommunicated something minor. But the truth had already seeped out. Everyone knew, everyone saw it. He had fired the wrong person, and he'd done it with a smile. At Crescent Stratagem, I sat at my desk in a sunlit office, wrapping up a call with a new client in Santiago. The coffee beside me was still warm. I hadn't lifted a finger. They had done it all themselves. And the storm? It was only just beginning. The following week unfolded like a slow-motion avalanche. First came the panic. Emails flooded Leonard's inbox. Internal, external, investor side. Mid-level managers scrambled to understand what had gone wrong. The marketing department postponed 2 major campaigns. Sales was told to pause international pitches temporarily, which everyone knew meant one thing: damage control. Second came the rumors. Whispers of compliance gaps, loss of client trust, and potential reputational fallout crept through corridors. Leonard's new hires, the polished LinkedIn prodigies, started avoiding eye contact. One even asked an assistant what Kagami's official grievance had been. The assistant didn't answer. No one did. At Crescent Stratagem, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I had more important things to do. By midweek, I received quiet outreach from 2 other former Harrison clients. Not formal, just soft inquiries. Messages from executives I had worked with for years. We heard you've moved. We may be evaluating our compliance strategy. Are you open to a brief conversation? I didn't pitch. I didn't sell. I listened. I reminded them, gently, what respect sounded like, what consistency felt like. By Thursday, both clients had begun preliminary talks with Crescent. No press releases, no PR fireworks, just silence, strategy, and the subtle shifting of loyalties. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in a while. Unknown caller, Chicago Exchange. I let it ring, then again, 30 minutes later. This time, the caller ID read, Harrison, Executive Line. Curious, I answered. Elena? Came Leonard's voice, falsely bright, forced through a smile he wasn't wearing. I hope you're well. I'm very well, I said plainly. I was hoping we could talk, clear the air, perhaps even explore a collaborative path forward. Maybe consulting support? Just informal guidance, no strings. I said nothing. He rushed on. Obviously, there were misunderstandings, transitional hiccups, but we could really use someone who understands the legacy accounts. He needed me to clean up the mess he made. I waited a long moment before responding. Let's meet, I said softly. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office. Leonard exhaled, clearly relieved. Perfect, I'll be there. I ended the call without another word. That night, as the city flickered through light rain, I sat at my kitchen table, not angry, not even bitter, just focused. Leonard didn't want an apology. He didn't want to fix anything. He wanted a lifeboat. He thought this was an invitation to return. He was wrong. Tomorrow, he'd find out exactly how wrong. Leonard arrived 10 minutes late. Of course he did, still clinging to the illusion of control, still believing he had the leverage. He stepped into Crescent Stratagem's glass-walled conference room like he was walking into a negotiation he intended to win. His smile was too wide. His eyes darted around the room, trying to measure how much ground he'd already lost. Elena, he said, extending a hand. Good to see you again. I shook it once, cool, brief, and gestured for him to sit. He did, dropping into the seat across from me, like a man who was used to being the one offering favors. I appreciate you taking the time, he said. Things have shifted unexpectedly. I let the silence hang long enough for the discomfort to rise. We're recalibrating after the Kagami incident, he continued, eyes flicking to my expression. Some of our transition efforts were misinterpreted, and frankly, we need your insight. You understand these partners. You've built bridges we don't want to burn. No acknowledgement of the dismissal, no apology, no ownership. Just strategy dressed as humility. You're offering me a consulting role, I said evenly. Quiet, uncredited, invisible. He hesitated, then nodded. No need for formalities, just some guidance. Behind the scenes. I tilted my head slightly, studying him. So you want the benefits of my work, I said softly, without the public admission that you were wrong to remove me. Leonard's smile faltered. It's not personal, he said quickly. It's business. I returned his smile, only mine was razor thin. So is my answer. His brow creased. What do you mean? I'll consider your offer, I replied calmly. But on my terms. He blinked. And what are those? You'll see, I said, standing. This meeting is over. Leonard didn't move right away. His expression shifted from confusion to unease, but I had already turned toward the door, because this wasn't about re-entry. This wasn't a comeback story. This was a reckoning. I hadn't waited this long for revenge because I was angry. I waited because precision matters, because power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from being the one who controls the silence. He thought he was using me. He didn't realize I'd already begun dismantling everything he built. And now, he would watch me do it. The first rule of revenge isn't fury, it's patience. And I had waited long enough. That weekend, I planned with clinical precision. Not to storm the gates of Harrison, but to deliver a message no one could ignore. Quietly, legally, devastatingly. Leonard had signed my consulting contract without reading the fine print. Buried within was one simple clause: full access to legacy accounts and communications history. By Monday, I walked into Harrison Global Logistics not as a savior, but as a ghost with clearance. No announcement, no welcome back email. They tucked me into a sterile glass pod between logistics and client relations, a deliberate move to make sure everyone saw me, but no one remembered I had ever belonged. Perfect. By noon, I had quietly re-established contact with Mr. Takeda, not through official channels, but through a private business number he'd once handed me over a ceremonial dinner in Kyoto. He answered after 2 rings. "Miss Brooks," he said, calm but cautious. "To what do I owe this call?" "In truth," I said in Japanese, slow and formal, "to apologize. For the confusion, for my sudden absence, and for what it implied about our respect for your partnership." There was a pause, a long one. "I feared as much," he replied quietly. "I suspected it was not your choice." "It was not." I paused, then added, "I am now with Crescent Stratagem Group. We operate with transparency and respect. If ever you reconsider your partnerships, we would be honored." He didn't respond right away, but when he did, his words were careful, deliberate. "I believe that time may come sooner than you think." We ended the call in perfect formality, and just like that, the foundation beneath Leonard's empire began to crumble. Over the next 10 days, the dominoes fell fast. 2 more key international clients quietly began exploratory conversations with Crescent. Vendors shortened payment terms for Harrison. Loss of trust. A European partner froze all pending contracts, citing reputational instability. Internal departments scrambled to update compliance processes they no longer understood. Layoffs resumed, but now without explanation or exit interviews. Inside Harrison, the mood turned from tense to hollow. The buzz of productivity had been replaced by whispers behind glass doors. People spoke in fragments. The hallways echoed with silence. Leonard gave speech after speech about resilience, market headwinds, and agility. No one believed him. On a gray Thursday afternoon, I received a final desperate message. "He's blaming you now. Says you were never that critical, just a relationship holder. He's calling you a social climber." I didn't react, because I knew men like Leonard. When they failed, they didn't learn. They rewrote the story to make themselves the victim. But the truth was simple. I didn't sabotage him. He did it to himself. The following Monday, I called for one last meeting. He showed up looking worse for wear. Dark circles, wrinkled collar, watch still polished, but slipping over his wrist like a costume that no longer fit. "Elena," he said, his voice flat, "please tell me we're turning a corner." "I'm not here to consult," I replied. "I'm here to say goodbye." His jaw tensed. "You're walking away? Now?" "No," I said. "I walked away the day you fired me. This," I gestured to the fallout behind him, "this is just the final chapter." His voice cracked slightly. "You did this?" "I didn't destroy anything. I simply reminded the world what respect sounds like." He slumped back, speechless. I gathered my folder and stood. "You fired me without understanding my work. You replaced me without asking what I built. You told the world I didn't matter. Now the world is answering you." He rose shakily, desperate. "You'll regret this." I smiled, really smiled this time. "No, you will." And then I walked out of Harrison Global Logistics for the last time. No tears, no victory lap, just silence, and the sound of a kingdom falling behind me. Not because I burned it, but because the man in charge never learned how to hold the match.